I will now call this meeting to order, Police Committee, April 27th, 2021. There's no public input, and we'll look at the adoption of the minutes. 3.1, I need a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the Police Committee meeting held on November 20th, 2020 be adopted. Okay, that was Etchard and Christofferson. And any errors or omissions? All in favor? Carried. That's okay. We'll slow it down for the rest now. 4.1, RCMP update, and I'm going to turn it over to Staff Sergeant Major Steph Drouin.
Worship, thank you.
Oh, can I have you turn your, yeah, you turn that and I've turned that, and now you're on.
Okay, right on. So, Your Worship, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I just wanted to provide the committee with an update on a few things. First of all, a strategic planning update for 2021. As some may know, the strategic focus of our force is something that we identify yearly through internal and external consultation. So this year, after that process, we've identified 4 objectives with a number of initiatives to tackle. And I think it's important to just highlight that when I talk about these things, everybody knows what the cops do, in the sense that we're responsible to respond to calls for service when the radio goes off. So this is really intended to focus on the times that the police, is not engaged in those activities. So we quite frequently refer them as proactive policing measures. So for 2021, our first objective is, of course, to enhance public safety. And we're going to do this by focusing on road safety, business safety, downtown safety, and school safety. Our second objective is to enhance relationship with Indigenous communities. It is very much a national mandate. And we're going to do this by focusing on elder events, youth events, community safety events. And we have a goal to update our letter of expectations with all the merit bands, or all the bands surrounding merit that we provide policing services to.
Does that also include Cooks Ferry?
No, it does not, but they do have, I know that they do have an area here, but they're covered by the Lytton detachment under the Community Tripartite Agreement. So
That's something maybe Sean and I can look into. They're covered by them, but they have a reserve area here, which seems kind of odd that they're covered.
yeah, that's right. But in terms of if there's a calls for service, if you say related to this housing development, we would respond. Obviously, Lytton doesn't respond, but in terms of the enhanced policing portfolio that is attached with the Indigenous policing section, they are covered entirely by Lytton detachment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The third objective is to is substance abuse, by focusing on the distribution of harmful drugs in our communities, and by focusing on the implementation of an opiate strategy to tackle high numbers of overdoses. We know that these numbers are growing, or have been growing, and we are looking internally to see what we can do to help with the bigger problem. And the last bit is a leadership continuum, by focusing on employee development and employee engagement and recognition. That's intended to keep the workforce happy, with the high morale and that stuff. Secondly, I wanted to provide an update on, well, I guess if there's no question.
Is there any questions for Staff Sergeant?
Okay, so I wanted to provide an update on the for staffing. As the committee would know, that the City of Meriden made a request in March 19, 2020 to the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General of BC for an increase in establishments for municipal funded positions. The request worked its way through the provincial and federal governments and was approved. I guess happy to report that we've now in March filled up one of those positions, and coming up in June we have identified a member from the RCMP Training Academy to join us, and he will be filling this last position. With this arrival in June, that'll give us a full complement of 26 regular members, 17 of those positions being funded directly by the City of Merritt, and the rest being funded either through the provincial or federal government. Any question on that part?
Doesn't look like we have any questions.
Very well.
I've got a quick, kill that.
Oh,
I was just laughing, I know it takes a while to get your candidates, but this one isn't coming till 21. They're
Oh,
100 years, we're really waiting a long time.
yeah. I'll talk to my typist.
Yeah.
I emailed myself. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Last issue, it's kind of picking up on the conversation that we had during the last meeting. We did a bit of a analysis of our calls for service for 2020, and this is kind of like the breakdown here. And I've attached some graph here, but in a nutshell, essentially, what we've looked at the number of occurrences where police files were generated that occurred within the municipal jurisdiction. In this analysis, we identified that municipal resources handled 67% of the occurrences in the municipal jurisdiction, while the provincial resources handled 27% of those occurrences. Federal resources, so those would be the Indigenous Policing Unit, responded to 2% of the occurrences. And then we also have the BC Highway Patrol here that operates out of the Merritt RCMP building, but is a provincially funded unit with an area of service that is far larger than mine. They've handled 3% of the occurrences in the municipal jurisdiction, and those would mostly be probably like traffic related. So everything I just mentioned here, can be looked visually on the graph there on Appendix 1A, which kind of gives you that breakdown, and there's a 1% here for unknown. That's just due to some data errors probably. And then we did a bit of a comparison with previous year, which more or less demonstrated that this has been consistent. So this is Appendix A2, which kind of gives it to you in a different graph there, and kind of show you the distribution of occurrences within the municipal boundaries. So again, to be fair and look at what's happening in the provincial or rural jurisdictions, we did the same thing on that side of the house. And in this analysis, that would be your Appendix B1 and the graph, we've identified that the municipal resources handled 56% of the occurrences in the provincial jurisdiction. The provincial resources handled 24%. The federal resources 6%, BC Highway Patrol 12%, and then we have another category there for external resources. So those would be probably assisting agencies within the RCMP that have come through the jurisdiction and probably lended a hand. And again, we did a comparison back to 2018, which is your Appendix B2. Which demonstrate that that's been fairly consistent here for the past years. Next, we hope to do a bit of a comparison with other similar jurisdictions in the district, and so that we would like to see, I guess, our staffing levels at the provincial and municipal level compared to other jurisdiction, and go from there. And And, yeah, that's basically it for my update. Of course, Marlene here with the Community Policing Office, has a role to play in our policing plan, so I wanted her to kind of explain where some of her work fits into our plan here. Unless there's any question, I'll pass the mic over to Marlene.
Ask for questions. Steph, can you actually explain to us how that fits into our 15, now almost 17 FTEs and the workload? Is it distributed appropriately?
Well, that's, I think,
It's hard to tell from that.
well, I think that's one, Your Worship, that it's hard for me to comment on that. I think the numbers provided there kind of paint the picture in terms of, where our member, like where your members are working. How do I answer this here? I think
Mr. Smith,
when you look at the fact that you have your municipal resources handling 60% of your calls in their municipal jurisdiction, with 27% of those calls being handled by the provincial jurisdiction, the provincially funded members, and you compare that to what's happening on the provincial side, it is not quite 50-50, it's fairly close, because you got 67-56, or you're comparing 27 to 24. I don't know if that answers the question, but.
okay, Mr. Smith is gonna add to that.
Because I'm not in the RCMP, I can probably say things slightly different than Steph can and still not be in trouble for it. The short of it, the question that we really need to answer, and ultimately I think this is going to require some council advocacy at the end of the day, is that we receive some services from provincial RCMP. They respond to calls in the city of Merritt. As you see, 27% of all calls in the city of Merritt are responded to by provincially funded RCMP. But we, as in our municipal RCMP that we pay for, or at least majority that we pay for, it's still a split because we're under the population threshold. We provide services, in fact, more than half the calls outside of the City of Merritt are still responded to by City of Merritt RCMP members. And so I think what Steph is kind of very politely getting at is that we may need to advocate for more provincial resources to ensure that they have sufficient coverage to ensure that they're able to meet the needs of the RCMP outside of the City of Merritt. It is not quite apples to apples because there are more calls in the City of Merritt than outside, so we have to kind of do a little bit more analysis to make sure that on a call volume basis that those numbers shake out. But I think that there probably is a good case for a council to request additional provincial RCMP resources to support. And this has a lot to do with the fact that we are in between highways, and we have our municipal members go out and do work outside the City of Merritt to support the fact that this is the city we live in, and we have highways all around us. And I think it's just making sure that we're not paying more than we ought to because of that, and that the province is kicking in a fair share. And they may well be, but it's just going to require further analysis.
Okay, that's kind of the answer I was looking for. If we had the data to suggest that or not, so we need to dig deeper.
Yeah, and that's understood, Your Worship, and this is part of the next analysis that we want to do with the comparables with other jurisdictions here. Obviously, with what Sean is saying is quite correct in that the number, if you compare the number of calls in the provincial jurisdictions versus the municipal jurisdictions, there's fewer calls, but there's also fewer bodies or fewer members being funded, for the percentage of calls. So the question will be the question we'll try to answer through the next analysis will definitely be whether or not the number of provincially funded resources that we have within the Merit detachment are sufficient for those calls.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay,
We're gonna
No.
try to get more people that we're not paying for.
yeah,
That's the long and the short of it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we all pay for it through provincial taxes, but, yeah, not locally.
yeah, and I understood that clearly. And you need our help to do it. And Councillor Richard, did you?
Well, my only comment was if we're a population over 5,000, how do we lobby for more funding? Because isn't it mandated as soon as you hit 5,000 that it's a 70-30 split?
We're way over 5,000.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. Since we're over 5,000,
Oh.
don't we still have to pay the 70%?
Yes.
We
but
only do that for the municipally funded positions. For the
Oh.
the provincial resources that he's referring to here are 100% funded by the
Okay.
province. They work out of the merit detachment, but they
They're funded
are
by-
funded by the province. So
Okay.
it would be trying to get more 100% provincially funded positions. Is that correct,
Yes.
Steph? Yeah,
Hmm.
that's the idea.
So your 70-30 split is for, like you said, for all of your municipal
17.
position here?
17, yeah.
Yeah, and then the other positions that are 100% funded by the province, those are to look after the provincial areas outside of the merit
Mhm.
jurisdiction, right? So if you think of, anything on the Coquihalla, we see, somewhere in the summer, there are probably about 25,000 people traveling through the area.
Mm-hmm.
And then, just, all the way up to past Shakin Indian Band, where we cover there, right? So, big area.
That brought a question to my mind, if you have you finished
Yes.
asking? Not very clear in my mind what I was going to ask, but are most of the provincial accidents on the Coquihalla, or the provincial use of bodies?
A large portion, but I wouldn't say that most. I mean, there's, again, it's very seasonal, and, there's days where our members can spend the entire day up there, on a bad winter day when they're running from accident to accident. So, our members are responsible to respond to collisions, including fatal collisions. We have the ability to rely on the BC Highway Patrol when there's a fatal collision and there's a criminal element to the accident. But outside of that, we're responsible to take it. And on any given day, I may have one member who's funded entirely by the province. Some days I may have none.
Okay. Kurt, do you have another one? Councillor
Well,
Richard?
I was gonna say, perfect example would be Monday's closure of the highway, because exit 315 and 336 is before Logan Lake cutoff, and that's a provincial highway, so that would probably be a perfect example if we're trying to lobby for more support for the highway anyway.
Wasn't that Logan Lake that responded, or was
Well,
that?
we're just before Logan Lake, but isn't merit jurisdiction as up to the Logan Lake exit, or is it
That's a
before?
little bit before that, yeah.
Just before?
Yeah. So you're talking about the one last night there?
Yeah,
that was
between Helmer and
yeah.
Logan Lake exit.
That was Logan Lake, but then again, our members responded to assist because there is a need to
Okay,
cover
yeah.
traffic.
Okay. So you're out there a lot.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and I've said it before, and I think I'm saying this to people that know this very well, but merit is, I would say merit and hope are very unique in this province in the sense that we are at the junction of all these main highways. And so nobody's going you know, nobody's going east without going through Hope. Very few, I think, you know, will take the Southern Highway, so I think the bulk of it ends up being here, right? So anybody going north, you know, may veer off on Highway 1 at Hope, but again, that highway usage compared to the Coke is quite significantly less.
Mr. Smith?
This is actually a question more than anything else, because I wanted to make sure I'm clear on it as well. When you say municipal jurisdiction, is that talking about the boundaries of the municipality of Merritt?
Correct. Yeah.
So when we're talking about things in, even if it's just a little bit outside of Merritt boundaries, that's still provincial jurisdiction for the purposes of these statistics?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? And was council okay with the strategic plan itself? Do you think it covered what we have in our strategic plan? Was there anything that we have that we can be asking police to do? I think it pretty well covers it, but. Okay. Any other questions for Staff Sergeant Drouin? Okay, let's move on to community policing. And Ms. Jones, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Worship. So I'm reporting on behalf of the Community Policing Office, and we work definitely in strong partnership with the detachment. Constable Feller is our key connection to there. Right now we have 8 active volunteers. That's down significantly just with the pandemic, but we have 8 that are comfortable in working under COVID plans. We had them together earlier this week, actually, because of it being Volunteer Appreciation Week last week. So we just did a little check-in with them, and they were able to ensure that everybody met those kind of key players in our relationships. We have 2 new ones coming online. We have a youth volunteer who works behind the scenes, won't be up front, but helps out with some reporting, things like that. They like math better than I do, so she does lots of that kind of correlating stuff. And we have another youth in his 20s who's coming on because he's looking for some policing experience. So we're happy to have those younger people joining us. When we look at our activities month to month, we definitely have some focuses that we keep on a rotation every year, but we look strongly at the detachment strategic plan, and we fit pretty strongly into the enhancing public safety component of the detachment plan. So that's road safety, and when I looked at our numbers, we have a much larger presence now that we have the automated signs in our community. In the last 2 years, we've got 2 of those now, and we rotate them around the community in 24 different locations. They include highways, residential areas, school zones, and playgrounds. When I say highways, we're not out on the Coquihalla, but we are out on Highway 5A actually right now, monitoring those vehicles coming in from, let's say, Nicola Ranch, and looking at them coming into that light near Walmart, because that's sometimes a hard area for motorists to remember to slow down. Then we do, during events and things like that, we put the sign up, just monitoring and helping out even with other departments within the city to know how many vehicles are coming into the city at certain times. We have,
Ms. Jones, do you
Yes.
have some of the stats for that? Or even, I don't need it in writing.
Yeah.
On average, what are we looking at? Speeding vehicles?
Yeah, so we have 162,000 vehicles that we monitored over that time, right? So some will realize that we're monitoring them, some won't, because it just depends on how fast you're going. And if you go a certain amount above, there's a little white light that tends to get your attention, and so then people might understand. But yeah, so often when we're putting them in residential areas, we don't find actually as many speeders as what we would have thought, or maybe as what a citizen may have reported. So it's kind of nice to have a non-confrontational way to just go in there and have a quick look. There are some, and I think that, you know, when it's a residential area and that speed zone or the speeding there is 50, that can seem quite quick to some people. So, but it's nice to get an idea of what is actually happening. We often see maybe the first day that the sign's put into a location, we see more speeding then. By the end of it, we tend to leave them in a location for about a week. By the end of that, we see that everybody's pretty well adjusted, and there's studies that say that 70% of motorists will adjust their speed if shown in a non-confrontational manner. I think Merritt fits well above that. Our numbers show that. So, sorry, we have 49 different locations, I guess, and we're willing to create more. So if there is a concern, I know the detachment knows to send them through to us, City Hall does, but certainly we take them from the general public as well if there is an area where you're interested. So then after road safety, we looked at business safety. We have, at the end of 2020, we had 55 members in our business watch group. We've increased that a little bit to we have 62 now. Because of the pandemic, we primarily communicate with them via email. We had larger plans of going out and doing business visits and doing all that kind of stuff, and that's not a great thing, because if you're a business owner and if you're only allowing 2 people in your business, you'd like those to be 2 customers and not community policing people. So, but certainly we'll go if there's a request, but we're kind of leaving that alone and doing more virtual engagement. Downtown safety, we do have regular patrols out. There was recently a little story about a couple of ours that have been at it for quite a few years. So they're out a couple times a week. I know myself and the youth volunteers, we go out. I think that we'll be looking at doing some additional bike stuff in the next little bit here. And then Constable Feller, with him coming to the office late last year, we really have increased the regular member patrols downtown, and he says that there can be up to 60 in a month. So that's nice because the public really wanted that. So.
Yeah.
School safety kind of fits in a little bit with business safety. There is a little bit of a limited access to the schools. So Constable Feller is attending there now, but not to the extent I think that was expected. He's been able to do some virtual events, but we do that a little bit with collaboration on a youth committee as well, and that has the First Nations support workers on it, but certainly, like many others, looking forward to the pandemic sort of stabilizing and then us being able to get back into some of these areas. Then the next area that we focus on with the detachment strategic focus is the substance abuse area, where the detachment is doing sort of looking at the implementation of opioid strategy and stuff like that. We've been working in that area for quite a few years, but we come at it from a support and social lens. So the community policing office is involved with the shelter, and Constable Feller provides guidance to us on safety and what is actually legal, what is illegal, versus sometimes our interpretation of what should be and not should be allowed. Because of the complex nature of some of the challenges that people are experiencing, we've sourced more funding, been able to get an actual social worker full-time in the shelter now, as well as a lead staff person. So they have a team leader there now, and that team leader is really going to help the development of the staff, because, you know, quite a few years ago, but anyways, in previous years, the shelter staff were actually just volunteers, and so now with more complex issues and things that we never really thought that they'd have to be dealing with, it's going to be important to have some staff development there for safety and for their longevity. Just, we don't want to burn out. Those are some, you know, good members of our community, and they find themselves in a tough position.
And right now we have a number of grants available for COVID-related issues. Sean, would these, or Mr. Smith, would these fit into some of these categories? Or
many of these Marlene is actually very intimately aware of because she was instrumental in assisting, for example, the most recent one that went forward to the council for just about every social thing that we could conceive of. A lot of that came directly from Marlene. So,
Okay.
yeah, we're definitely trying to pair any funding that we can find
Good.
to assist with these types of problems.
But there is no funding for a building. Land and a building, preferably.
Yeah, buying land is a tougher sale, generally speaking. I think that that's something that we're gonna need to, because, I mean, it's applicable for this, but I can't tell you how many other things where I've heard from council, we want a park, we want a spot for a bathroom, we want all of, so land acquisition, I think, is going to be an important part of making sure that we have a strategy moving forward. And we're gonna need to cobble together some more money in order to be able to do it, though, so,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, and then I would guess that's sort of the final part that I wanted to talk about in the social supports part that we're helping the marginalized in the community is the Endeavor to Be Better program. Now that right now is being funded partially by a grant that the city provided through Community Action Initiative. That funding will continue, and we'll use that up by the end of June and report out on that finally in July. That program is open 7 days a week, and it provides an area for just anybody in the community to drop in and connect with the community. Often, if you have a home and kids in school and a job and things like that, those community connections are open to you. But if you don't have those sorts of things, then it's really hard to stay connected. And then in a pandemic, it's even maybe a bit more difficult. So this program has been going well. It's open, like I say, 7 days a week. It has 4 staff now. And I believe, in talking to the coordinator recently, he's actually making arrangements to come to talk to council as a whole, I think, at one point, just to update on
Good.
those sorts of things that are happening. So they have lots of success stories, been able to connect a lot of people with services. The issue is that those are also, we remember those success stories are directly tied to individuals' lives and privacy and things like that too, but it's great to see that things are going ahead, and I think that program is strongly tied to that most recent grant that was just put in so that we can,
Put in and then increased, is that the one?
yeah. And so I think it will be nice as a service provider in the downtown core, I look forward to this having some time to build and recognition and seeing what the longer term effects are. Often these things last for 6 months and then go away, and that's kind of difficult when you're trying to connect with people and give them something, right? So does anybody have any questions?
Councillor Christopherson.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back, Marlene, to the school safety. That's a different concept right now than what's in the news, I would presume, with the Vancouver School Board not having the officers go into the classrooms and into the school anymore. Is that correct, or?
Well, Constable
I know
Feller,
when I was teaching, there was the DARE program, and I think that kind of went by the way eventually. I think it had been in the schools for almost 30 years, hadn't it? But I'm just wondering what the response with the schools is like now, because I always felt it was quite positive to have the officers come into the school and get to know the kids, and sometimes it depended on who the officer was, how effective it was with the students in the classrooms. Some really got along very well with the kids and had an excellent response, and others just weren't that comfortable. But overall, I thought it was a worthwhile idea of having students be able to connect with the police and see them as human beings and so on. Is that component in this school safety thing, or is it a different type program?
thank you. Constable Feller is the coordinator, so he is the one that makes sure that each school has an officer assigned to it, and then follows up with them, and they report to him on when school visits are done and what sort of activities they took part in. There is a limitation on how much people are from outside the school are going into the schools at this point. They
Because
can
of
go
COVID.
in,
Yeah.
if there is a call, they go in and work directly with teachers and all of that stuff. But I'm not sure how much extra thing there is right now. Those friendly little visits where you walk down the hall and you saw Constable, you know, back in when it was before the pandemic, it was Constable Dunsmore was with us. And yeah, there was a lot more exposure to them then. And you would say that that's going to return. It's just that.
Yes, I think to answer your question, the reception that and the relationship that we've had with the school district here has been very good. And I think that our officers have been welcomed in the schools and they feel welcome. So I'm aware of what you're speaking about. I think we've seen that happen in the south side of the border and even in some of our larger cities in Canada here. But here in Merritt, it's we haven't felt that. It's very much like a tight-knit community, and I think that our officers, are very community-oriented, and that helps. So again, we're happy to adapt as the community's expectations change, but at this point in time, like we're happy with the way things are with the schools.
Are you finding that there's starting to be some of that reaction coming about in the interior places that's happening in the larger centers now?
I haven't seen it myself, no.
And I'm
not
glad to
aware
hear
of it.
that. Yeah, because I think it's a valuable program to have interaction going on, and after listening to the news for the last couple of days, you kind of, I don't want to overreact to it, but I was disappointed for the news media reaction to it.
Yeah, it's important for us to create these, these links with youth, because they're the next generation coming up. So I think we ought to listen, we ought to hear what they have to say, and we have to, build the relationships now, so that we can hopefully, help take the walls down, right, if that makes sense.
Good, thank you, I appreciate that.
And I apologize. Are you familiar with everyone in the room? Should we have done introductions? We should have.
Especially for ones that flew in at the last minute.
I'm so sorry.
No, we've met online and then by accident trying to get somewhere.
Yeah. And you met the school administrator, ex-school administrator. Sorry, I apologize. Do we have any more questions? One of the things we don't have on part of a quarterly visit is financials. Wayne, do you have a quick update on financials?
I don't have an update for the meeting today, and just going through the budget that you have there with your staffing complement. Did recognize that we are a little bit short if you're going to be at 17 FTEs by July, because historically we've never seen it come up to the level of the complement. So we budgeted the last 2 quarters at 16. So we're a bit short there, but there may or may not be a 16 on the 4th quarter. Who knows, right? I guess you might have people leaving or coming and going and those sort of things. So based on the fact we ended the year at 12.9, I think, on the last quarter, we went 14, 15, and then 16, 16 on the head count. So, but it sounds like you're successful on getting people in, so that's a good thing. But I think we're light on the staffing with the support people that you've got as well too. So like you're not where you need to be on the support side. The five merit funded support positions.
Yeah, correct, that's for the support staff. So we've got
Yeah.
some vacancies that we're in the process of hiring staff, and the city is actually hiring staff, right?
Yeah.
The city's component, though, doesn't show up on the policing side, does it? I guess it
The
does.
overall cost of policing would include the city staff
On a different line.
on a different line. It would be
Okay.
city-funded union staff versus the RCMP contract cost. So I don't have the most recent quarterly statement, so I don't have a number of what we're gonna be billed for in this quarter, so I don't have a lot of information. The next meeting, I can come with that information and we can forecast out where we're gonna be, but it's kinda hard at this point with the information that I do have.
Yeah. Well, I knew it was gonna be a tough sell trying to get something in April.
So, I would love to just take a moment, if it's okay, Your Worship, to discuss what you would want and expect to see at these meetings as we're kind of getting the police committee meeting up and running. So, I mean, we can make a point of kind of presenting the financials as they stand at each police committee meeting. That won't be a problem moving forward if that is kind of an expectation of council. Is there anything else that you are wanting to see either from city staff or from Marlene or from Steph so that we can make sure that we're getting you what you want to know for this meeting?
Council? Christopherson?
Maybe it's on my mind since the mayor and CAO and I went up to Vision Quest, but I was interested in the approach that they were taking towards drug rehabilitation, but also counseling services and all of this, and Merit has been, for years, kind of looking to see what can be done on a more local level. I was kind of astounded to see how close Vision Quest was to us, and yet we really haven't had a lot of contact. I guess what I'm asking is, I would like to have a more sort of a current idea of what the crisis is in Merit and what opportunities there are to seek help for individuals to break the cycle and so on. So I'm not sure if that's part of the police report or not, but if it could be, I'd be most interested to see how Merit can start to look for opportunities to help those people that are in those difficulties, and particularly with the approach of getting them to have counseling and effective techniques to weaning them off the drugs and to getting to have a more positive outlook, how they can benefit the community rather than to be a burden on the community and so on. I'm babbling, but I was really quite impressed with what I saw up at Vision Quest, and that's why I was late today, that Dan Elvis happened to phone just prior before I came down, and that's particularly what we were discussing, the kind of supports for those kind of programs. And Vision Quest isn't the end all and be all, but I was also really impressed with the fact that they had opportunities to work with other groups, other methods, and so on, that if a person doesn't fit into how this one is operated, I think it was Mustard Seed that was also there, that there are opportunities to say, well, this works for these individuals, this works for these ones, and so on. I think we've got quite a crisis going, even in Merit, and I would like to see ways that we can start to be proactive.
Yeah, so, in terms of Vision Quest itself, I will say this, I met with the director, and I arranged a tour myself, I want to say in late summer last year. And as a result of that visit, one thing that we did in partnership with our Indigenous Community Policing unit is we created a card that was made available to our members, and was also made available to those who wanted it within some of our some of our indigenous communities and even in the city here that provide some information to people who may want to access that service. Of course, if there's an addiction component to it, my understanding is the Vision Quest Center does require someone to go into detox first, but they will help greatly with getting clients there and back into Vision Quest. But of course, it's the whole program relies on voluntariness for that part, right? Yeah, no, I hear you, and I think I think there's a place for the program as well, and you know, we're happy to continue to work with them.
Councillor Etchart?
I think my only question was, with all the information that we got around the community policing, kind of focusing on the shelter, understanding that with the wasn't it the Strengthening Communities grant that we just were applying for? Was that the one that, yeah, with the budget and, yeah, so with the social worker, would they be assisting then with helping people maybe with finding ways and resources to weaning away from the drug abuse perhaps, or?
Yes, so that one grant was tied directly to the Endeavor to Be Better program.
Okay.
And that is that sort of frontline, really low barrier, drop in, make a connection, connect you to services. The shelter social worker that I spoke about earlier, that person is actually positioned in the shelter. Now, Endeavor to Be Better can go and see that shelter worker, but that position, because it's directly in the shelter, it's funded by BC Housing. So that's nice, it comes with provincial funding attached to it. So even if we lost a program within the community, as long as the shelter's open, that social worker stays there, all going well. We do have an additional social worker that I never spoke about yet with that society, and that's Housing First. So often the people that she's dealing with are a little bit less marginalized than maybe the shelter or Endeavor to Be Better. Those people may have housing but may be at risk of losing it. She can definitely help those that don't have it at all, but I know in previous reports that she's given me, I think she's up to 32 clients or 38 clients or something like that she's helping. So we have to have sort of realistic expectations of what one human can do in a 7-hour day, right? But yeah, so now that society, and that's the Nicola Valley Shelter and Support Society, that's where the Community Policing Office sits on a board and helps. That's kind of Merit's homegrown solution to those sort of social supports. It started about 12 years ago and has been growing in the last sort of 3 years since I've been involved, and we've really seen quite a large growth in that, but that's in response to the large need for service, right? I don't think we may not have seen this need growing to the point it is now back when it started, right?
I don't think anybody did.
No. And it's continuing to grow, and it's continuing to be a concern. And there are some funds available, but there's also got to be a will of some of these clients to want to make changes. Hopefully we find the ones that want to make changes and can help them out. But
yeah, a part of the program that's really quite popular is the work experience program. I think today they were doing their first lawn care sort of thing, right? So the peer mentors will take them out and do that kind of thing. I know, I won't steal their thunder, but I'm sure when they're going to come and talk to you, they'll be able to fill you in on everything that they have planned. But yeah, there's opportunities there for people to help out, and for them maybe to help business owners or something, like cleaning up back alleys and all that kind of stuff. I know primarily they've been doing garbage cleanup in the community. But now that's changing over now, and they're going to be doing a little bit of lawn maintenance and things like that. Give these guys some skills, guys and girls. There's female participants as well. And, when you talk to people that are coordinating or peer mentoring in that program, they really beam because they feel like they're making a connection. So I'm encouraged by that.
And one of the things that, back to Vision Quest, they talked about being funded. They are owned by BC Housing. So it is a BC Housing assisted program. And they were hoping that some of these individuals, or they're talked about, some of them, housing first isn't the first thing they need. Sometimes it's just something else, and these people will put them directly into. They don't need a home first in order to access their program, basically. They will find where they need to be, or where they can be funneled into whichever program is available. But if you haven't been up there, Marlene, it's really worthwhile just checking it out.
I'm familiar with the facility, and I actually haven't been on site. I was going to go with Indigenous policing at one point, but I just didn't work out. I'm not frontline worker, so I really support this from the back end and oversight and governance and financial, so that our community has this and that marginalized individuals aren't further marginalized through crime. So I really try to keep it myself at a prevention crime versus a social service component, but certainly if there's an opportunity, it's an interesting thing to me. I know we have quite a connection because there was previously an RCMP officer who retired, so he left Steph's office and came to work at the shelter for us for a season, and then left us and went to work at Vision Quest. So we kind of watched that kind of transition. Though, yeah, lots of, you can use those portable skills.
Yeah, and we're not trying to get you to move over the path you want to be in. But right now they are so intertwined that it's hard to keep them separate at this point. Councillor Etchart, did you have another question?
No, I feel that my questions were answered. Thanks.
Okay. And Mr. Smith, are you on for a reason? No? Okay, nobody else wants to speak. Does that mean we're at the end of our meeting, or does that mean we're happy with what's on the agenda for next time? Good. Councillor Christopherson.
Yeah, it's more of a gut feeling, Marlene, but do you feel like things are getting better or easier to cope with, or that the drug, the opioid crisis is getting worse in Merritt?
Tough one. Personally, I can answer personally what I think. I see it, and I see it on the faces of the frontline support workers in our town. I think that people are getting tired. There's a lot of stress out there. The pandemic hasn't helped at all. And you know, in one arm, we've said, you know, there's a pandemic, so please go home. But there's an opioid crisis, so please don't use alone at your home. So do you know what I'm saying? Like it's a very difficult thing, you know. So in the shelter, we've had to make quite a few changes with that, and staff are maybe getting tired. So I think it's a very individual thing. Whether you're a support worker or you're the person facing that challenge in the community, you'll have your up days, you'll have your down days, and sometimes those will last weeks. We see that some people are really struggling, and it could be the death of a friend within this crisis, or it can be just too much pressure of no connection because of the pandemic. It's really an individualized thing. I think we see some numbers, and those are concerning, maybe percentage increases and things like that, but we don't see those numbers necessarily for every other community either, right? So we're just kind of looking at our community and trying to decide what the best supports are for people, and sometimes they will make a connection and sometimes they won't.
And I suppose it's hard to separate that from the COVID. crisis, that
Yeah, because it is, I think as soon as you say that there's a crisis, that adds stress for some people, and some people are using for multitudes of reasons, and sometimes it's to numb the stress.
okay, thanks.
Which brings us to the whole opioid crisis and the increase in the number of deaths compared to last year at this time. So we're anticipating more of a crisis, I assume, within this area.
So your worship, I want to say in the last 2 weeks here, we did a joint media release with BC Ambulance and Interior Health, where we spoke to that issue. Forgive me here, it's going back a few weeks, but if I recall correctly, in 2020, there was like 50 and change, like 50 something overdoses in Merritt.
57.
In the first 3 months of 2021, the numbers were 26. So the numbers obviously would indicate that the number of overdoses is likely to increase this year compared to last year. Again, we haven't put our finger on it in terms of what the cause of that might be. I mean, certainly COVID pandemic, I think would have something to do with it. We don't know if it's because there's worse drugs out there in terms of like bad batches of drugs. And we're obviously doing what we can on our end to address it, but it's also a social issue that we have to work with, that we have to work on in partnership with Interior Health and BC Ambulance, even the city fire departments, and because it's quite frankly a social issue that isn't just a police thing alone.
We also know that our homeless count went up from, I don't know, I know it's 297%, but the numbers are still up to 41 or something, from 18 to 41. I'm wild guessing at these numbers. We know that we have this crisis in our community. I think we just don't know what to do with it. Mr. Smith?
I just wanted to note that definitely the numbers went up, but so did the count methodology, which I know that your worship is familiar with. So there was the change in criteria to include those who functionally were on couches and in friends' places as counting the homeless count, which I'm not saying that's inappropriate. I think that is probably wholly appropriate. It's just that the numbers historically didn't used to count that, so that's why it looks particularly inflated this year. So difference in statistics that does make the percentage change a little bit.
Yeah, but it still says we have a crisis, and it's not solely or anything to do with city at this point. I mean, the city does not do social issues, but we certainly are there to liaise and help and do whatever it is that we can do for the betterment of our citizens. What that is, I'm not sure. I know we've got a lot of things happening out there, and we don't know at this point if it's making a difference. And throw the pandemic in there, and we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. And I think that's the crime issue associated with it is City of Merritt concern. So it's, again, I feel you're doing what you can do based on all the parameters that you have around you. But I have no other ideas. And I don't know that the councillors here do either, but.
Well, the good news, your worship, is that, as I reported in the last committee, you know, in compared to other years, the crime rate in Merritt has reduced significantly, and we've seen a reduction in crime rate in BC across all the jurisdiction since the pandemic. Now, that doesn't equate to a reduction in calls for service, because as you can imagine, some of the calls for service that may have been linked to criminal offenses now, or now being linked to other things that, such as COVID, and we're getting calls about that. We don't know if it's going to stay this way, of course, but we're paying attention.
And that's all we can ask at this point, so. Any other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, then we will terminate this meeting. Thank you.